Sometimes, the difference between being broke and being a millionaire is as small as finding a crumpled $5 bill in the most unexpected place. This is a shocking, unbelievable money story of Madison. It was a boring Tuesday, the kind of day that drags its feet like a grumpy old man. Madison slouched through the automatic doors of the town library, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. She didn't have anywhere important to be, no exciting plans, no urgent errands, just the usual grind of two terrible part-time jobs that barely paid the bills and left her wondering if life was supposed to feel this stuck. The library smelled like dust and old paper, a comfortingly sad kind of smell, like forgotten stories waiting to be noticed. Madison liked it though, it felt quiet here, kind of a safe place for her. She wandered past the worn tables and creaky chairs until she found herself standing in front of a battered metal cart labeled with a piece of crooked tape. Discarded books, $1 each. Perfect. Madison wasn't really in the mood to read, she was thinking resale. If she could find something old, something rare, maybe she could flip it online for a few extra bucks. Rent was due in a week, every dollar mattered these days. She thumbed through the pile, lifting up cracked hardcovers and sagging paperbacks that smelled like they hadn't seen sunlight since the 70s. Romance novels, DIY home repair guides, a weird manual about training pigeons. Nothing special, until her fingers landed on a crumbling leather-bound novel with no title on the cover, just faded black stitching along the spine. It felt heavier than the others, solid in a strange way. Curious, Madison flipped it open. And that's when it happened. A crumpled $5 bill fluttered out from between the pages, floating lazily to the floor like a tiny, forgotten secret. For a moment, Madison just stared at it, blinking. Then she laughed, the first real laugh she'd had all week. She bent down, scooped it up, and waved it like a tiny victory flag. Best thing to happen all week, she muttered under her breath, slipping it into the pocket of her worn jeans. But as she was about to toss the book back onto the cart, something caught her eye, something weird. Along the edge of the $5 bill, so small she almost missed it, there was a writing. Tiny, spidery ink that looked like it had been scrawled by hand, so faint it nearly blended into the paper fibers. Madison squinted, bringing the bill closer to her face. It read, "Find the heart of the lion, and the treasure is yours." She tilted her head, rereading it twice, then 3 times. Was it some kind of prank, a leftover scavenger hunt clue, or some weird inside joke? Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't normal. Madison felt a tiny jolt of excitement buzz through her chest, like the feeling you get when you realize the plot of a boring movie might actually turn out to be good. She glanced around the library. Nobody else seemed to notice her little discovery. The old man dozing in the corner, the librarian tapping away at a keyboard, a couple of teenagers giggling over their phones. Without thinking, she shoved the $5 deeper into her pocket and tucked the leather book under her arm. She told herself it was nothing, just a weird coincidence, just a silly note some bored kid had scribbled years ago. But deep down, Madison felt it, the kind of feeling you can't just walk away from. As she headed toward the checkout desk, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting someone to come running after her, but no one did. Still, the words stuck to her mind like glue. Find the heart of the lion, and the treasure is yours. And no matter how hard she tried to shake it, Madison knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to be able to forget about that $5 bill anytime soon. That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her room, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked around and around like a lazy metronome. Her mind kept circling back to the $5 bill, to the strange message, "Find the heart of the lion, and the treasure is yours." By midnight, she'd given up on sleep entirely. She pulled out her phone and started Googling the phrase, thinking maybe it was a quote from a book, a riddle, something she could trace. But nothing, no famous lines, no hidden treasure rumors, no ancient codes, not even one conspiracy theory Reddit thread. It was like the message didn't exist anywhere, except for that worn little bill in her pocket. That should have been her cue to let it go, get some sleep, go to work in the morning and forget about crazy treasure hunts. Instead, Madison found herself pulling on a hoodie, grabbing a flashlight, and lacing up her sneakers, because here's the thing about broke 20-somethings. When life hands you a weird, maybe dangerous, possibly life-changing mystery, you go for it. By 1 a.m., Madison was back at the library. It was locked up tight, of course, but the drop-off area, a little side door for returning books after hours, was technically open, and the lock on the door leading from the drop-off room into the library, well, it was a little rusty. And Madison had spent enough bored nights watching YouTube tutorials to know how to wiggle a door loose with a laminated library card. Her crazy decision number 1, she broke into the library. Kind of. The place was pitch black inside, silent except for the low sound of ancient AC units and the creaks of old wooden beams settling. Her flashlight beam wobbled as she made her way toward the staff-only staircase in the back, the one that led down to the basement archives. Madison remembered that place from years ago. Rows of dusty books nobody touched anymore, old paintings, weird furniture that probably belonged in a museum and, if she remembered right, a big old statue of a lion. Exactly the kind of crazy lead her gut was telling her not to ignore. She slipped through the heavy door and down the stairs, her heart pounding louder with every step. The basement smelled even worse than she remembered, like mildew and forgotten history. It was darker down here. Madison stumbled forward, bumping into furniture, nearly knocking over a coat rack and, at one point, accidentally setting off a motion sensor that made a loud beep. Her heart dropped. Alarms. Had she triggered an alarm? She ducked behind a filing cabinet just in time to see the janitor, a big guy with a walkie-talkie and a very unimpressed look on his face, come stomping through the hallway. Madison held her breath so long she thought she might pass out. Finally, after what felt like hours, the janitor grunted and moved on. When she was sure the coast was clear, Madison crept deeper into the basement, and there it was, tucked in a dark corner, covered in dust and spider webs. A broken, forgotten lion statue. Its stone face was cracked, its paws chipped, but its mouth was slightly open, just enough for something small to fit inside. Hands shaking, Madison reached into the lion's mouth. Her fingers brushed something cold and metallic. She pulled it out. A tiny brass key, and not just that. Wedged behind the key was a scrap of yellowed paper, folded and fragile. In faded ink, it said, "Box 32, trust the oldest hands." Madison stared at the key, then at the note, then back at the lion statue. Was this real? Was she dreaming? Was she actually inside a hidden scavenger hunt, in a public library? The realization hit her like a slap and a hug all at once. Either she was about to get arrested, or she was about to get rich. She grinned, heart thundering, the flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. No turning back now. It took Madison about 30 minutes of pacing in her apartment before she figured it out. Box 32 wasn't a safety deposit box, it wasn't a mailbox, it had to be the old P.O. boxes. Back when the library had been built, way back in the 1940s, there was a little post office annex built onto the side. Madison remembered hearing about it once from an old librarian. It had been abandoned sometime in the 1980s, sealed off, forgotten. There was just one problem. The annex was locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Madison stared at the tiny brass key in her hand. She knew what she should do. Give up, walk away, let it go. But after everything she'd already risked, sneaking into the library, hiding from a janitor, practically committing low-level burglary, did it really make sense to quit now? No way. So she made her crazy decision number 2. Around 11:30 p.m., she slipped out of her apartment and headed for the sketchy bus stop down the block. The one with the flickering streetlight and the guys who always seemed to know a little too much about shortcuts. That's where she found Danny, a guy she barely knew except that he always smelled like motor oil, and she didn't even hesitate. "Hey, Danny, $40 if you can help me get a door open tonight." He raised an eyebrow. "You ain't trying to rob nobody, are you?" "No, it's a scavenger hunt," she said, hoping he wouldn't ask too many questions. He shrugged. 40's 40, and just like that, she had herself a partner. By midnight, they were crouched in the shadows behind the library, facing the rusted side door of the old annex. Danny pulled a set of tools from his jacket. Where he got them, Madison didn't want to know, and got to work. It took 10 tense minutes of fiddling, swearing, and one very suspicious cat wandering by, but finally, click, the door creaked open. Instantly, the smell hit them, mold, rot, something long dead. Madison gagged but pushed forward, shining her flashlight into the darkness. The annex looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Broken table, torn mailbags, dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts, and rats, big ones. Madison screamed once when one scurried across her sneaker and almost called it quits right then and there, but she kept going, step after creaky step, feeling the rotten wood groan under her weight. At one point, her foot went straight through a floorboard, sending her crashing onto her hands and knees. Danny had to yank her back up, saying, "Man, you owe me more than 40 if you die down here." Finally, after what felt like hours, they found it, a wall lined with tiny metal doors, the old P.O. boxes, and there, halfway down the row, tarnished but still legible, Box 32, Madison's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the key. She slid it into the lock, turned it with a satisfying click, and the tiny door swung open. Inside, there was no money, no gold, no sparkling jewels. Instead, there was a carefully folded piece of thick parchment. A hand-drawn map, not just any map, a blueprint of the library itself, detailed, precise. But this version showed something she'd never seen before, a hidden room, a sealed-off space tucked deep inside the library's walls, built during the Great Depression, no entrances, no exits, a place that, according to every modern floor plan, shouldn't exist. Madison's mouth went dry. If this was real, if she followed this map, she wasn't just chasing a rumor or a lost treasure, she might be about to uncover something no one alive even remembered. A secret buried so deep, it had survived for almost a century. She folded the map carefully, tucked it into her hoodie, and turned to Danny. "Thanks for the help," she whispered. He just shrugged and disappeared back into the night. Madison stood alone in the dark, heart hammering in her chest, staring at the library looming in the distance. This had just gotten real, really real. Madison knew she couldn't pull this off alone. As much as she hated it, she needed Danny, the shady guy who'd already helped her break into a government building for $40. She called him back and they renegotiated. Problem was, Danny was getting suspicious. "What's even in there, huh?" he kept asking as they planned the next move. "Better not be bodies. I don't do bodies." Madison just smiled nervously and handed him a fresh 20. "Just help me one more time and I swear, it'll be worth it." So the next afternoon, in broad daylight, they pulled off the dumbest, craziest plan yet. They dressed like college students. Madison borrowed an oversized hoodie, threw a backpack over her shoulder, and tucked a crowbar inside. Danny wore a pair of glasses with no lenses, pretending to study a fake syllabus as they shuffled through the library's front doors. No alarms, no security, just two very bad actors pretending to be very bad students. They wandered aimlessly, pretending to argue about classes, until they found their way down the back staircase, and slipped, unnoticed, into the dusty, restricted basement again. The place smelled even worse in daylight, hot, damp, full of the kind of mildew you could taste. Madison pulled out the secret map and traced their steps carefully. Down 2 corridors, past the abandoned microfilm room, behind a row of broken file cabinets. There, just like the map showed, was a wall, plain, dusty, cracked. But if you looked closely, you could see it, the faint carving of a lion's head, half worn away by time. This was it. "You sure about this?" Danny asked, glancing around nervously. "Nope," Madison said, and yanked the crowbar from her backpack. Her crazy decision number 3 was breaking into an ancient stone wall, during public library hours. While possibly being recorded by a dozen security cameras, she jammed the crowbar into a crack near the base of the wall and heaved. Nothing. She tried again, harder, gritting her teeth, feeling the metal bend in her hands, and then, with a deep, shuddering groan, part of the wall cracked. Dust exploded everywhere. Somewhere upstairs, a faint alarm started to beep. Not a full security breach, just one of those minor, something's weird, sensors. Madison didn't care. She shoved her shoulder into the crack, pried it open wider, and finally, a narrow gap appeared, enough for them to slip through. Inside was a hidden room, so full of dust and mold that Madison coughed the second she stepped in. There was no fancy furniture, no chandeliers, no shining light from above, just a single crumbling chest in the center of the room, half swallowed by the dirt and rot of the past 80 years. Danny rushed over, grinning like a maniac. Together, they hauled it open, smashing the rusty lock with Madison's crowbar, and when they did, boom, gold, actual gold. Thick, heavy bars, old coins stamped with dates from the 1920s and 30s, strange antique jewelry glinting through the dust. Madison froze, her brain short-circuiting. This wasn't pirate treasure, this wasn't somebody's lost family heirlooms, this was Depression-era wealth, stashed away when banks were collapsing, hidden by some reclusive millionaire who had built his mansion right where the library now stood. Danny just kept shouting, "Holy, holy, holy," staring at the pile like he was about to faint. Madison was shaking, crying, laughing. Somewhere deep down, she realized, the $5 wasn't random. Some descendant must have planted it decades later, leaving a breadcrumb trail, waiting for the right person, someone crazy, and desperate, enough to follow it, someone like her, but before she could even start planning how to carry all this out, they heard it. "Hey, who's down there?" It was the library security, apparently. Smashing through 100-year-old walls triggers a bigger alarm. Well, the final chase mode was activated. Madison and Danny grabbed as much gold as they could stuff into their backpacks and bolted through the basement, dodging ancient debris and furious guards. They burst out of a fire exit into the sunlight, hearts pounding, gold bars weighing them down. As soon as Madison and Danny got clear of the library and caught their breath, Madison made a decision that most people would never think of. Instead of running straight to a pawn shop or flashing the gold around, she rented a cheap, grimy motel room under a fake name, spread out the gold across the bed, and started Googling how to legally claim historical found treasure, without losing it to the government. Turns out, because the library had been built over private land, and because no official records existed about the hidden vault, Madison could file a finders keepers claim under abandoned property laws in her state. Instead of going public, Madison hired a sketchy but brilliant old lawyer she found through an online conspiracy forum, a guy who specialized in weird asset recovery. Together, they laundered the treasure legally by having it appraised as antique estate goods from an undisclosed source. Result: no jail, no seizure, no IRS nightmare, just pure, clean, spendable millions. Madison didn't just find gold, she outsmarted the system, and turned a secret scavenger hunt into a life that nobody could ever take from her.